The roller climbed onto my airplane, and the aluminum folded with a scream I felt in my teeth. I braked hard at the edge of my property, gravel snapping against the truck's undercarriage. Diesel exhaust drifted through the open window, mixed with hot hydraulic oil and the scorched earth smell of fresh asphalt. Beyond the windshield, my private airstrip no longer existed. Steel teeth had ripped the packed surface into crooked brown trenches. Orange survey stakes stood where runway lights had been. A yellow bulldozer shoved broken pavement toward a growing pile, while a 12-ton compactor crawled over my single-engine plane. The left wing was already flat. Plexiglass glittered beneath the drum like ice. The white fuselage buckled again, releasing a sharp metallic pop. I left the engine running and stepped out. Heat pressed through my boots. "Shut it down," I shouted. The bulldozer kept moving. The compactor rolled backward and crushed what remained of the tail. A woman in a cream blazer emerged from behind an HOA golf cart, one hand gripping a clipboard, the other raised toward the operator. "Vanessa." Her heels sank into the torn soil, but she walked toward me as if she owned every acre beneath them. Two contractors watched from beside a dump truck. Neither met my eyes. "You're trespassing," I said. Vanessa smiled and adjusted her sunglasses. "Actually, Ethan, we just removed an unauthorized airport from the community." Behind her, the compactor engine dropped into an oily idle. Its cooling metal ticked in the sudden quiet. That aircraft was on private land. It was a nuisance. She tapped the clipboard with one polished fingernail. Noise, safety concerns, declining property values. The board acted under emergency authority. A strip of blue paint from my plane clung to the roller's steel drum. Each rotation had stamped it into the dirt like a signature. I looked past Vanessa toward the north fence. The chain had been cut cleanly. My lock lay near a tire rut, packed with clay. Beside it was a bent aluminum sign, half buried beneath gravel. Vanessa followed my gaze. "We cleared the obsolete warnings too," she said. They looked intimidating. I walked around her. The sign's lower corner had been folded backward, and two mounting bolts still hung from it. Red lettering showed through the dust. Vanessa stepped close enough for her perfume to cut through the diesel fumes. "The board can discuss compensation if you cooperate. But construction begins Monday, so I suggest you accept reality." I brushed the grit from the metal with my thumb. She expected shouting, maybe a threat. Instead, I lifted the sign and tucked it under my arm. Its broken edge was warm from the sun. "That's all you're taking?" she asked. I looked once at the crushed cockpit, then at the fresh tire tracks leading through my severed fence. "For now." Her smile returned as the machinery roared back to life. She had erased the boundary, destroyed the plane, and declared victory before I reached home. But as I carried that bent warning sign to my truck, one question mattered more than the wreckage. What exactly had Vanessa shown those contractors to make them believe they were allowed onto my land? Cold fluorescent light washed across the county records room, turning the steel cabinets the color of old bone. A scanner hummed behind the counter, and the air smelled of paper dust and burnt coffee. By 8:07 the next morning, I had the bent warning sign wrapped in a moving blanket inside my truck and my parcel number written on a yellow request slip. The county clerk fed a survey plat through a wide-format printer. Rollers clicked. A clean black line crawled across 36 inches of paper. "Your western boundary ends here," she said, tapping the survey monument beside the access road. "The airstrip is entirely inside your parcel." I followed the bearings with one finger. The runway, fence, drainage ditch, and gravel turnaround all sat on my land. Not 1 inch belonged to the HOA. The clerk opened the digital permit archive and searched Vanessa's filing number. A red banner flashed across the monitor, "NO record found." Then she pulled the contractor submission cached from the county portal. Vanessa's name appeared beneath an electronic signature. Attached was something labeled Emergency Hazard Abatement Authorization. The county seal looked blurred around the edges. The issuing official's name was misspelled. Worse, the approval date fell on a Sunday, when that office had been closed. "This isn't one of ours," the clerk said. Her chair stopped squeaking. She printed it without another word. The altered site map was slick with warm toner when it landed in the tray. Vanessa had shifted my eastern property line nearly 1,400 feet west, swallowing the runway into HOA common space. Pale green shading covered the strip and extended over my fence. At the center sat a rendering of walking paths, decorative ponds, and a building marked Future Community Clubhouse. A financial projection was clipped behind it. Homes bordering the proposed park were expected to gain between 9 and 14% in value. Vanessa had not mistaken my property for HOA land. She had redrawn the boundary, manufactured emergency authority, and used both to send heavy equipment through my gate. I requested certified copies of the original plat, her altered map, and the false authorization. The clerk stamped each page. The metal seal struck the counter 3 times. Hard, flat, final. Before I reached the parking lot, my phone vibrated against the folder. Vanessa's name glowed on the screen. "The board has approved a generous settlement," she said when I answered. Her voice carried the soft clink of silverware and restaurant chatter. "You'll be compensated for the aircraft if you sign a release acknowledging that the runway encroached on association property." Wind lifted the corner of the certified survey in my hand. "Send me the offer." A pause followed. "It expires at 5. Then send it quickly." I hung up and slid the real plat beside Vanessa's version across my truck hood. In black ink, my boundary was exactly where it had always been. In green, she had moved it with a mouse and bet my future on nobody checking. At 8:41, her settlement arrived. Attached to it was the altered map and one sentence demanding that I surrender every remaining claim to the land before sunset. Heat shimmered above the wreckage when a faint electronic chirp rose from beneath the folded wing. It repeated every 6 seconds, thin and stubborn under the ticking of hot aluminum and the sour smell of hydraulic fluid. By noon, the contractors were gone. I stepped through the county deputy's evidence tape with written authorization in my hand, pulled on leather gloves, and followed the sound toward the airplane's crushed cargo bay. The roller had flattened the fuselage until the riveted skin looked like foil. Orange survey paint streaked the tail. Mud packed the instrument panel. Near the rear bulkhead, however, a reinforced steel case remained wedged beneath a bent seat rail. The case was dented, but its status light still blinked green. I cleared the debris with a pry bar, lifted the 40-pound box onto a tarp, and wiped grit from the stenciled lettering. U.S. Forest Service Cooperative Fire Mapping Program. Vanessa's settlement valued the aircraft as an old single-engine plane. It said nothing about the federal infrared sensor, smoke density monitor, or encrypted telemetry unit secured inside it. Those instruments had been installed under my wildfire monitoring contract 3 weeks earlier. I owned the airplane. The government owned the equipment it carried. A paper inventory sleeve was bolted to the case, protected beneath a clear plastic cover. I opened it and found transfer forms listing every component by serial number. Replacement value sat near the bottom in unforgiving black type, $287,400. That figure still wasn't the worst of it. The telemetry unit continuously buffered video whenever its vibration sensor detected movement around the aircraft. I connected a field battery and rugged tablet using the cable stored inside the case. The screen flashed white, then filled with digital static. Wind pushed diesel fumes across the torn runway while the recovery bar crawled forward, 34%. 61. 98. A timestamp appeared. The recording began with the fence shaking as a loader shoved through it. Vanessa entered the frame, wearing the same cream blazer I had seen that morning. Her voice came through the wing-mounted microphone beneath the growl of machinery. "Take down the government sign first. I don't want it in any photographs." A worker asked whether the airplane should be towed. Vanessa walked closer, examined the federal asset decal beside the cargo hatch, and tapped it with one red fingernail. "No. Crush it with everything else. Once it's scrapped, he'll take the check." Metal thundered across the speakers. The image tilted as the first tire struck the wing, but the camera kept recording. It captured her ordering a second pass. It captured the roller operator asking to see the permit. It captured Vanessa holding up the forged authorization and telling him the board accepted full responsibility. At 2:17 p.m., my phone displayed her final reminder: sign by 5 o'clock or receive nothing. I photographed the serial plates, duplicated the recording onto 2 encrypted drives, and placed the original data box in a tamper-evident evidence bag. The seal snapped shut with a dry plastic click. Vanessa thought she was bargaining over aluminum and paint. Her own voice had just turned that bargain into something money could not erase. The question was no longer whether she had ordered my plane destroyed. It was how long I could keep her from realizing the plane had heard every word. The red digits on the wall clock clicked to 4:41 as cold air hissed through the HOA conference room vents. Lemon cleaner burned my nose, and Vanessa's perfume hung over the polished table like something sprayed to hide smoke. I set her settlement packet beside my chair without opening it again. Across from me, Vanessa tapped a silver pen against the signature line. $325,000, she said. More than that old plane was worth, and generous considering your encroachment. The agreement required me to accept her altered boundary, surrender every claim involving the airstrip, and keep silent about the demolition. Once I signed, her forged map would become the version she could wave in front of homeowners, insurers, and anyone else who asked questions. My phone vibrated against my ribs. The wildfire monitoring coordinator's name glowed on the screen. I stepped into the hallway, where late sunlight cut through the blinds in narrow gold bars. "We can't hold next week's flight window," he told me. "Without a certified aircraft and operational runway, we have to reassign the contract." The words were quiet. The cost was not. That contract covered my hangar insurance, fuel reserve, and most of the airstrip maintenance for the year. Reassignment meant no flight pay now and no guarantee the route would return to me. I watched dust drift through the light. Then I said, "Understood." When I returned, Vanessa had uncapped the pen. 48 seconds, she said, smiling. I slid the agreement toward her. For 1 second, she leaned forward as if the money had finally done what the roller could not. Then I drew a single line from corner to corner across the signature page and wrote "declined" in black ink. The pen scratched loudly enough to silence the room. "You're walking away from everything," she said. "No," I replied. "I'm refusing to sell you the right to rewrite what happened." I left her copy on the table and carried mine outside. By 5:18, I was back at the airstrip with orange evidence tape, numbered seals, and weatherproof stakes. The afternoon wind pushed the sour smell of hydraulic fluid through the torn grass. I photographed every tire mark, chained the access gate, tagged the roller's crushed aluminum impressions, and fixed a preservation notice where my lock had been cut. The original data box went into a fire-rated cabinet inside my workshop. One encrypted copy entered an overnight evidence shipment. The other went into a safe deposit envelope. No public accusation. No angry post. No warning to Vanessa that her voice had survived. At 6:03, her SUV slowed outside the fence. Through the dusty windshield, I saw her studying the tape and the sealed wreckage. I lowered my eyes, let my shoulders sag, and shut off the hangar lights one row at a time. She mistook silence for surrender. Her brake lights flashed once, then disappeared toward the subdivision. Behind me, my phone displayed the contract cancellation in clean black letters. I had given up the only income that could have paid for a quick replacement because rebuilding too soon would destroy the scene she wanted erased. The airstrip went dark, and the evening insects filled the quiet. Vanessa believed she had bought my defeat for nothing. Now I had to find out what she would build when she thought no one could stop her. Rotor wash should have been hammering the cottonwoods by noon. Instead, hot wind dragged dust across the sealed runway, making the evidence tape snap against the fence with a dry plastic crack. My phone vibrated inside my shirt pocket. The county emergency coordinator spoke over the hiss of a bad connection. "Ethan, the medical helicopter can't list your strip as the secondary landing zone anymore. Dispatch suspended it this morning." Before I could answer, another notice arrived. The Forest Service had halted low-altitude wildfire patrols over our sector until a replacement field could be approved. The nearest suitable runway was 43 miles away. That distance looked harmless on a map. In an ambulance, with oxygen hissing and summer heat pressing through the roof, it could become the longest 43 miles of someone's life. By afternoon, the consequences had crossed Vanessa's decorative stone entrance. A medical helicopter circled once above the subdivision, its blades beating the air like distant artillery, then banked north because it had nowhere safe to set down. An ambulance below crawled toward the highway with its sirens stretching thin between the houses. Residents stepped onto sun-bleached lawns and watched it disappear. No one mentioned property values. 2 Forest Service trucks arrived next. Their tires crunched over gravel outside my gate, while the crew posted a red suspension notice beside the broken federal sign. The paper smelled of fresh toner. Its message was simple: emergency aviation operations unavailable. Vanessa responded before sunset. Her golf cart hummed into the subdivision square, carrying a portable speaker and a stack of glossy renderings. The drawings showed children beneath shade trees, a fountain where my windsock had stood, and a clubhouse covering the western end of the runway. She tapped the microphone. Mr. Ethan's refusal to cooperate has forced public agencies to suspend services. Her voice bounced off stucco walls. The board offered him fair compensation. He chose obstruction. A man near the fountain lifted the red notice he had pulled from my fence. Did he destroy the landing zone? Vanessa's smile tightened. He refused to release it for community use. That lie lasted 8 seconds. A woman held up her phone, displaying the county parcel map beside Vanessa's altered version. Blue light washed across her face. Then why did your filing move his boundary? Murmurs rolled through the square. Vanessa killed the microphone, but the speaker squealed before going silent. For the first time, the residents were not looking toward my dark hangar. They were looking at her. She recovered fast. By morning, white envelopes appeared beneath every front door. Inside was a petition declaring my remaining acreage a public nuisance and requesting county condemnation for critical recreational access. Vanessa needed 60% of HOA households before Friday's emergency board session. She went door to door herself, heels striking concrete, telling families that taking my land was the only way to restore safety. I did not argue with her. I drove to the subdivision entrance, stepped into the smell of hot asphalt, and mounted enlarged copies of both maps on opposite sides of my fence. The certified county plat and Vanessa's altered boundary. Between them, I posted the ambulance suspension and wildfire notice. Cars slowed. Windows lowered. Phones came out. Vanessa stopped across the road with petitions clutched against her white blazer. "Take those down," she said. I locked the display case and pocketed the key. Her surrender deadline had failed, so she had replaced it with a vote. At Friday's session, she intended to make the community seize everything her machines had not already destroyed. Gold scissors flashed beneath a white canopy while a portable speaker hissed through the opening notes of America the Beautiful. By 10 Friday morning, the ruined airstrip smelled of wet cement, diesel exhaust, and fresh-cut sod. Vanessa had planted rows of folding chairs directly over the scars left by the roller. Behind her, a banner stretched between 2 steel poles. Future home of Willow Creek Community Clubhouse. I parked outside the construction fence and walked in carrying one document envelope. My boots scraped over crushed runway aggregate. Residents turned in their seats, phones lifting as they recognized me, but Vanessa never stopped smiling. Her white blazer had been replaced by a blue suit, and a ceremonial shovel rested beside the podium like a trophy. "As of this morning," she announced, "we are reclaiming dangerous, neglected land for the benefit of every homeowner." Applause came from 6 board members near the front. The rest of the chairs stayed quiet. A contractor unfolded a site plan across a plastic table. It showed a 2-story clubhouse, swimming pool, and 78 parking spaces laid across the former runway. Vanessa uncapped a silver pen and signed the construction contract in full view of 3 cameras. The amount printed above her signature was $1.8 million, funded through HOA reserves and a special assessment she had approved that morning. That signature changed everything. Until then, she could still claim the demolition crew had misunderstood her authorization. Now she was committing community money to build permanently inside the sealed evidence field. The concrete pump growled behind us. Its jointed boom swung overhead, dripping gray slurry onto the gravel. I stepped between Vanessa and the waiting shovel. One of the contractors moved toward me, but I held up the envelope. "I'm not stopping your ceremony," I said. "This is a formal preservation notice covering the runway, the aircraft wreckage, removed signage, contractor records, and every planned alteration to this site." Vanessa took it with 2 fingers. The paper was warm from the sun and stamped with the receipt number already delivered to the HOA's registered agent. "Another threat?" she asked. "Notice," I said. "There's a difference." Camera shutters clicked. I pointed toward the yellow stakes surrounding the crushed plane-sealed footprint. "From this moment forward, destroying or covering anything inside those markers is a deliberate act." Her jaw tightened. For 1 second, only the pump engine and the dry rattle of the canopy filled the silence. Then Vanessa tore the notice down the middle. She tore it again, dropped the pieces into the mud, and ground them beneath one pointed heel. "Pour it," she ordered. The contractor stared at the shredded paper, then at the signed agreement. Vanessa slapped the contract with her palm. "You have authorization. Continue." Hydraulic valves hissed. Thick concrete surged through the hose and spread across the blackened runway, swallowing tire marks, broken asphalt, and the edge of the yellow evidence boundary. Residents backed away as the bitter cement dust reached the chairs. I did not touch the machinery. I did not raise my voice. I simply turned my phone so its camera captured Vanessa, the torn notice beneath her shoe, the signed contract, and the wet concrete advancing behind her. She had wanted a public victory. Instead, she had placed her name, her money, and her final order on the same recording. The question was no longer whether she had entered the wrong property. It was who would arrive once the government saw her burying what she had been ordered to preserve. A gust pushed cement dust across the folding chairs, leaving a gray film on polished shoes and paper programs. Behind the canopy, the pump hammered steadily, and wet concrete crept over the runway with a soft gravel hiss. I reached into my truck and lifted out a flat archival case. Vanessa saw the federal seal on its clasp and tightened both hands around the ceremonial scissors. "Another scare tactic?" she called. I set the case on the signing table, opened it, and unfolded a certified plat beneath the harsh white sun. The paper snapped in the wind until I pinned its corners with 4 broken pieces of runway asphalt. "The county survey already established that I own this acreage," I said. "But ownership isn't the only right attached to it." I placed a second document beside the plat. Its blue recording stamp was dated 26 years earlier. Vanessa leaned forward, perfume cutting through the alkaline bite of concrete. "That's an easement," she said. "Exactly." My finger followed the shaded strip running the full 3,840 feet of the runway. A permanent federal emergency use easement. This airstrip was enrolled in the Federal Emergency Landing Network. I own the ground. The federal government holds emergency access and operational rights that an HOA cannot terminate, relocate, condemn, or build over. The contractor eased off the pump. Its engine dropped to a nervous idle. Vanessa glanced toward the residents, then forced out a laugh. "Private land cannot be federal property just because you printed a map. The soil is private. The protected infrastructure isn't." I removed the bent aluminum sign from the case. One corner was torn where she had ripped it from the fence, but the black lettering remained visible beneath streaks of dried mud. Federal Emergency Aviation Facility. Obstruction, damage, or unauthorized removal prohibited. The wind went quiet for one strange second. Even the canopy stopped snapping. "That warning was posted on the gate," I said. "You ordered it removed before demolition." Her gaze dropped to the crease across the federal emblem. I laid down the cooperative use schedule next, then the aircraft equipment inventory bearing the same property code. The landing surface supported federal emergency access. The telemetry package inside my plane belonged to the U.S. Forest Service. The right to use this strip during wildfire and medical emergencies belonged to the government. You didn't erase an unapproved hobby runway. You obstructed a protected federal facility and crushed federal equipment after acknowledging its markings. Vanessa shoved the papers aside, but the archival case stayed open, its metal hinges gleaming. "The board voted," she said. "Your board has no jurisdiction over a recorded federal easement." I turned the certified plat toward the contractor and tapped the easement number, then pointed to the same number stamped into the damaged sign. He looked from the document to the wet slab covering the yellow evidence line. Without asking Vanessa, he reached into the pump controls and pulled the red shutdown lever. The hose coughed once. Concrete stopped moving. Vanessa's scissors slipped from her fingers and struck the table with a bright metallic crack. Around us, phones rose above shoulders. Residents who had come to celebrate stepped off the poured foundation as if its surface had become thin ice. I closed the case, but left the sign in plain view. For the first time, Vanessa was no longer deciding what happened on that runway. Her signature was fixed to the clubhouse contract, her voice was preserved in the telemetry box, and her shoe prints were drying beside the evidence notice she had torn apart. The land remained mine, but the authority she had challenged now extended far beyond my fence. Then the contractor's superintendent looked toward the access road, where the low growl of multiple diesel engines was drawing closer, and asked Vanessa the only question she could no longer answer. Who authorized us to pour over a federal easement? Red strobes washed across the wet concrete before the first black government truck cleared the gate. Diesel rattled through the folding chairs, and the sharp smell of hot brakes mixed with curing cement. 3 vehicles stopped abreast of the ruined runway. Doors opened. A Federal Aviation Administration inspector stepped out with a laser scanner, followed by a Forest Service special agent and 2 investigators carrying evidence cases. Vanessa found her voice first. "This is private HOA property. You need an appointment." The special agent held up his credentials without breaking stride. "Federal compliance inspection. Nobody leaves with records, equipment, or electronic devices until we clear them." That ended the question of whether the government would come. Now it was physically standing between Vanessa and the exit. I remained beside the broken warning sign while the inspection team took control. Yellow evidence tape snapped in the warm wind. One investigator photographed the torn preservation notice where it lay beneath Vanessa's heel marks. Another measured the concrete slab against the certified easement coordinates. The scanner chirped each time its red beam crossed fresh cement. Every reading landed inside the protected emergency use corridor. Vanessa thrust the HOA vote toward the FAA inspector. The community authorized this improvement. He examined the seal, then handed it back by one corner. A neighborhood vote cannot extinguish a recorded federal easement. Behind him, the contractor's superintendent killed the pump completely and ordered his crew to disconnect the hoses. Vanessa spun toward him. "You have a signed contract, and you represented that you controlled the site," he said. His foreman pulled the ignition keys from the loader. Steel teeth stopped inches above the fresh foundation, dripping gray slurry onto the gravel. The investigators did not ask me to prove the destruction again. They tested it. The surviving telemetry box clicked inside a portable reader, and Vanessa's recorded voice came through the speaker under a veil of static. "Crush the aircraft first. We need the strip unusable before Ethan gets back." No one moved until the recording ended. Even the portable flag above the canopy seemed to go still. The Forest Service agent opened the aircraft inventory I had preserved. Serial numbers from the crushed thermal camera, smoke density sensor, and encrypted communications unit matched federal property records on his tablet. He marked each item with an evidence tag, then photographed the roller's aluminum-scarred drum. Vanessa stepped backward, searching the residents' faces. Phone stayed raised. "That recording is out of context," she said. "Then provide the original authorization and all board communications," the agent replied. "Now." Her fingers hovered over her phone, but the FAA inspector sealed it inside a clear evidence pouch after issuing a preservation order for the HOA's cloud accounts, bank records, and contractor correspondence. At the same moment, a county deputy fastened a red closure notice across the unfinished clubhouse permit. The inspection had crossed the point where Vanessa could rewrite a map, tear up paper, or call another vote. Measurements, serial numbers, contracts, and her own voice now occupied separate federal evidence logs. The special agent finally faced her across the cooling slab. By 8 a.m. Monday, the HOA must surrender every record connected to this project and place the disputed construction funds under hold. Any deletion, transfer, or further work will be treated as obstruction. Vanessa's mouth opened, but the contractor spoke over her. "We're terminating for fraudulent site control." The residents heard it. So did the bank representative listening on the agent's speakerphone. Vanessa had lost the machines, the money, and the authority to move either one. Then the FAA inspector drove a survey stake through the center of her ceremonial foundation and tied an orange ribbon around it. "Restoration limits are established," he said. "Monday morning, we determine who pays to put this runway back." Monday dawn came cold and colorless, carrying the smell of wet clay across the orange survey stakes. At 8:03, the bank representative placed a steel lockbox on a folding table, and Vanessa slid the HOA's project records into it one binder at a time. Her gold groundbreaking scissors lay beside the files, stained with dried concrete. I stood beyond the federal boundary while residents watched from behind temporary fencing. No one applauded when the special agent accepted Vanessa's phone and signed the receipt. The only sound was paper scraping cardboard and the low idle of the restoration crew waiting at the gate. By noon, the HOA's insurer had denied coverage because Vanessa had knowingly ignored the preservation notice. The board then voted to remove her, waive every claim against my remaining acreage, and assign the seized clubhouse funds toward restoration. Vanessa tried to object, but her microphone was already dead. You can't spend association money on his private runway, she said. The FAA inspector set the recorded easement on the table. The soil is his, he replied. The emergency corridor you destroyed is federally protected. Your association pays because your recorded orders caused the damage. That distinction cost her more than the office. The settlement required Vanessa to surrender her board position, reimburse the HOA for unauthorized legal expenses, and place personal assets under lien for the uncovered balance. It also required the association to rebuild every foot of runway, replace the federal warning signs, and fund the destroyed wildfire equipment. Weeks later, excavators bit into the clubhouse slab she had poured over the center line. Concrete cracked with a dry thunder. Gray dust coated the folding chairs she had abandoned, while loaders carried the broken foundation away beneath the same orange ribbons she had mocked. I did not celebrate. I walked behind the paving machine, feeling heat rise through my boots as black asphalt covered the scars left by her roller. The new surface stretched 2,800 feet between fresh white markings, brighter and stronger than the strip she had flattened. On inspection morning, an FAA aircraft descended through pale sunlight and touched down with a clean chirp of rubber. Minutes later, a Forest Service plane rolled to the rebuilt equipment pad carrying replacement wildfire sensors. Then the county medical helicopter settled onto the emergency zone, its rotor wash snapping the new federal flag against the fence. Vanessa watched from the public road. No golf cart, no microphone, no board members beside her. The federal sign she had torn down now stood on two steel posts set in concrete. Permanent emergency landing easement. Obstruction prohibited. I met her eyes through the fence, then locked the gate. The final restitution payment cleared that afternoon, and every emergency service suspended by her project returned to operation. My land remained mine. The protected corridor remained available to the people who might someday need it. Vanessa had tried to erase both with diesel, forged paper, and borrowed authority. In the end, the runway came back, and the only thing permanently removed was her power.